We're going to talk today about one of the most irrefutable trends in all of society and the investment characteristics we believe that you should look for to profit from this tailwind. So in order to help me with this, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the CEO of a large consumer company, and you need to advertise to your largest and your most important and most profitable demographic. That is affluent 18 to 49-year-olds. The problem is they all have their head in a phone, a tablet, or a digital device of some type. And so historically, you would just bypass those things and you would go to broadcast or cable and you would buy advertising, commercial time on one of the most popular programs. The challenge is cord cutting has changed all of that. And this is an irrefutable trend that is not going to go away. It's just going to continue of people moving away from broadcast or cable to streaming. And look how streaming has completely overwhelmed traditional media sources. Well, that means you've got to find a different way to reach your audience because they're all watching the streaming services that don't have commercials. So how do you actually reach your audience, especially in that key demographic that's so profitable for you? Well, you know that traditional non-sports content has declined by 43% in the last few years, but sports content is still growing. You also know when you do your research that in 2005, 14 of the top 100 most watched programs were sports, but by 2023, 97 of all the top 100 programs were sports. So that is making that content more and more valuable, which is why a 30-second Super Bowl ad has increased in price by 222% to now over $7 million for 30 seconds to reach your target audience. So the evidence is overwhelming. You need to reach your target demographic. The only place you're likely to reach them is when they're watching sports events. So that is where you're going to spend your advertising dollars. That naturally, if you take your CEO hat off and you put your investor hat on, that creates an investment opportunity for you. So based on what we saw in this tailwind, we started looking for 4 characteristics that we think you should also look for. The first is you want to find things that are high quality and resilient through all types of economic environments. Predictable and persistent are great words. We like to look for those kinds of businesses. We also wanted to find a way to directly benefit from the change in consumer behavior. Not a second or third derivative benefit, but literally directly benefit as people were cutting the cord. And we wanted to find companies that would actually not be harmed by inflation, but would provide for us a benefit if inflation happens that would also have less correlation to everything else that we might own. And then to follow Mr. Buffett's advice, we wanted to find businesses that have scarcity and very defensible moats. Very, very hard for people to compete with them. So as we looked, we found sports. The thing that surprised us about sports that we like so much is that not only have they delivered outstanding returns for the owners, but they've done so with very little volatility. Compared to traditional markets, much less volatility. And they've done that with very little leverage. As a matter of fact, in North America, when you own a sports team, you're basically not allowed to use much leverage at all by that league. And so when you look at correlation as the final piece of the puzzle, it's been a 0.14 correlation to the S&P 500. Almost no correlation to the major stock market indices. The revenue picture of resiliency that we talked about how we wanted to find that, sports fits to a T. So when you look at the NBA, it basically was a straight up line of revenue growth. Even during the global financial crisis, it was basically flat. The only exception, of course, was COVID, because if you have a live event business and you're not allowed to have live events, that's tough. But it quickly rebounded, pun intended, that now revenue is higher than it ever was even before COVID. The same is true in NHL, the same is true in Major League Baseball, the same is true in the NFL, where you have seen a literally 5x increase in revenue just since 2001. 5x in that short period of time. So when you have that much revenue growth, profits come along with it, and your valuation likely also increases. So all 4 of the major leagues have benefited dramatically with valuation growth, very, very strong performance for the owners of those teams. Another thing that we really liked about sports is the scarcity value. So in the last 20 plus years, they have added literally 4 new franchises total across all 4 of the leagues. So the deeper we got into our diligence, the more competitive advantages we found for major pro sports teams and the benefits of ownership of those teams. So when you own one of these franchises, high barriers to entry. They decide whether or not there's going to be any new franchises or not, and they're very protective of that. The league management, their job actually is to increase the enterprise value of all of the franchises. They're your ally. That means you literally are given a legal monopoly. That's a very strong thing for your business model. You also have a profitable business with significant potential tax benefits for a taxable investor, and your customer base is made up of these things called fanatics. Most people call them fans, but that's where the word comes from. These are people that are multi-generational fans of your team in many cases. So why would somebody who owns one of these teams or a piece of one of these teams actually want to sell? Well, life does happen. And sometimes people need liquidity, whether it be for planning or tax payments, or because something has just triggered a liquidity need, or sometimes, unfortunately, divorce happens and somebody is being forced to sell the team or the stake in a team that they own. We know of one situation like that right now. And in most cases, it's for growth capital. Somebody wants to invest in their stadium to improve the fan experience, or they want to buy real estate assets around that stadium, or they want to go and do some kind of a transaction, maybe acquire a team in another league to build a platform, a diversified portfolio of sports assets, or maybe they just want to expand more internationally. Regardless of the reason of why they're willing to sell, we have the opportunity to be a buyer and own a piece of these businesses that achieve all 4 of our primary goals. It gives us what we're looking for in resiliency, first derivative exposure to cord cutting. It gives us industries and assets that likely will benefit from rising inflation. And to follow Mr. Buffett's rule, businesses with scarcity and defensible moats.